We are still in chapter 6, mission number 6 of Pirkei Avos, the 48 ways to wisdom. We're up to way number 41. Misyashev libo b'talmudo. Now, what does this mean? So literally it means, misyashev means to sit or to be settled, to have your heart settled in your studies. Now, what exactly does that mean? If you recall, way earlier in our studies of the 48 ways to wisdom, we had way number 13, which was biyishuv, which we defined as with equilibrium, with a certain balance, to not be scattered, to be stable, to be grounded. That's the optimal state for study. If someone's always busy and very erratic in their studies and they do a few minutes here, a few minutes there, that's not a way to acquire wisdom. You have to sit down, you have to have a lot of time, and you have to be in the right frame of mind for study. We have a similar word here, misyashev libo b'talmudo. It's the same Hebraic root as b'yishuv, but here the focus is on the method of study. When a person studies, it should be a well-grounded version of studying, and it's not so clear initially what that means. And of course, the commentaries offer a variety of interpretations. So one idea we read is that when you study, you should be settled. It's something that you do when you're settled down. It's not something that you do on the fly. It's not drive-by study. It's not something you do periodically, episodically, occasionally. You should be grounded in your studies. That should be primary in your life's pursuits. Not something that you do in an ancillary fashion. Something that you do in a settled, permanent, and established manner. What's primary in a person's life? What's primary? What's the overarching objective? And what's secondary? What's tertiary? What's ancillary? Way number 41 tells us that the Torah study should be a permanent fixture of your life. It should be well-grounded. Now, what does this mean? A lot of people are gainfully employed, and people are busy with a lot of important things, their family, and they have their daily meals, and they have their responsibilities. When the Mishnah is telling us that Torah study should be something which is essential to our lives, it should be primary to our lives, that does not necessarily mean that it should be the bulk of our day. It's not measured by time, rather as what's the most important thing that I do in a given day? When do I become alive? When am I really engaged? If we want to fulfill way number 41 properly, when a person studies, that's when they become alive. We had earlier in the book, way back in chapter 1, we were advised, Asei Toroscha keva u'malachtecha arai. Make your Torah study permanent, and your work, that should be impermanent. That should be passing. And again, what that means, we said that earlier, what that means is that, if someone studies for 10 hours a day, but they're not doing it in a serious, well-grounded fashion, even though they have so much time dedicated towards it, it's not permanent. It's not well-grounded. Whereas if someone only has an hour, 2 hours to study a day, there's 20, 23, 22 hours that they're doing other things. But if that's when they become alive, that's where they feel like this is what I'm living for, they are well-grounded in their study, and their Torah study is keva, it is permanent. And so it is telling us that you want to acquire the Almighty's Torah. One of the ways to do it is to have an attitude shift and assigning primacy to Torah study. When you do that, your acquisition of Torah will be deeper and will be greater. And I was thinking, today in Israel, there is a very vigorous and strident debate about a 76-year-old precedent of allowing yeshiva students whose Torah to umanoto, which means their Torah is their job, is their occupation, is their profession, they've had an automatic army deferral from mandatory conscription. Every 18-year-old in Israel, they have to go join the army for 3 years. If you are a yeshiva student, if Torah is your occupation, your profession, for 76 years now, there's been a precedent that you can defer. So you're studying, okay, defer it until you reach the point where you're no longer desired by the army, you're too old, then you have a ptur. It means then you're absolved from army service. And this has allowed for the creation of an incredible empire of Torah study in Israel. There's hundreds of thousands of scholars who are spending 10, 15 hours a day studying Torah. And in my opinion, this is an incredible asset for the state. And in my opinion, and I believe that this is well-founded in the literature, when you have somebody, the heartbeat of a nation is Torah study, then the blessings will be found in all other places in the society. This will cause a wellspring of blessing to cascade throughout the whole land and country. I was looking this past week at the GDP per capita. Israel, it was like all they had was some agriculture. You know, they had some Jaffa oranges, and very, very quickly they became an incredible economic superpower. I look, they have a higher GDP per capita than the United Kingdom and France and Italy. And with all their problems, they're strong and they're dynamic. And what is the spiritual reason for such a bounty? To me, it seems obvious. There's such a flourishing, robust, dynamic Torah environment at the heartbeat of the nation, and that provides blessing for everyone. And I think this is especially important to preserve in times of war. There are many, many sources that talk about a weakening in Torah study automatically bringing about catastrophe. For example, the first war that our nation waged, chapter 17 in Exodus, even before the Sinai revelation, Jewish people leave Egypt and they are attacked by the nation of Amalek. And the Talmud deduces, the Talmud pinpoints, the cause of the conflict was a weakening of Torah study. That's why they were attacked. And there are many other examples of this phenomenon. When there's a weakening of Torah study provides protection. It provides a shield. And when that shield is removed, it right away results in attack. So I think it's very dangerous to tamper with Torah in volatile times. It makes you more vulnerable. And I'm listening to the debates that are happening right now in Israel. And some argue, well, if we conscript all the yeshiva students, we could carve out a system for them. They have a few hours of study every day. They can study while in the army. And, for someone not initiated in matters of Torah, it sounds logical. Well, they could have everything. They could still study and they could still contribute towards the security and defense of the nation as conscripts. And I think what is missing is this idea. The optimal way to acquire Torah, it's not just by also finding some time, carving out time for Torah study. If someone does a couple of hours incidental study every day, it's great and it's celebrated and it's the best thing in the world, but there's no fulfillment of being settled in your studies. You're not grounded in Torah. And that is a completely different dimension of study. When someone studies, it's, again, something to celebrate, but the higher level of acquisition of Torah and the deepening of the connection can only be done once this is Torah to umanato, it's their profession. So that's one idea of way number 41. Misyashev libo b'talmudo, when a person, that is their primary objective of life when they are pursuing study. There's another interpretation that the commentaries offer. And that is approaching the study in a methodical way, trying to go to the depths of Torah. That, of course, is of paramount importance, to not just subsist with a superficial study, to try to go deeper and to understand the other dimensions of insight. But how do you approach the depths of study? This way number 41 is Messiash. You have to be settled. Your heart has to be settled before you go deeper. To approach the depth slowly. There is an incredible, really infinite level of brilliance and ingenuity in Torah. It's really unfathomable. I've been in some of the great yeshivos in the world, and this is legitimate. People can spend a half a year, 6 months, on 5 or 6 or 7 pages of Talmud. And they could do that and not waste time. You know, we think, oh, well, they're studying only 6 pages of Talmud, or 7 pages of Talmud, or 8 pages of Talmud. And they're doing it for 6 months. They must be just spending a lot of time smoking and drinking coffee and chit-chat. But no, it's totally legitimate and common and routine for people to spend 10 plus hours a day studying for a half a year and not cover more than a couple of pages of Talmud. And this is not because they're slow or they're dense or they're mentally challenged or incapable. People who are very bright and very committed. And the reason why is because there's so much infinite depth. The study is unfathomably rich. There's so much depth that you could really spend a whole month on 1 page and not waste any time. But how do you approach those depths? Some people want a shortcut. They want to plunge in to the depth before being settled, before being grounded. They reach for the pizzazz before they are ready. And that's a problem, because that's an artificial depth. You have to approach it slowly and carefully. If you try to penetrate a subject too deeply before you really completely well-versed in the basics, it's not a recipe for success. So you have to always start with the most basic level and work your way deeper from there. You start at the Talmud, you read like every 2 words, every line, it's a whole different, it's a question, it's an answer, it's a proof, it's a challenge, it's a citation. And before you get to even any of the commentaries, even the most basic of commentaries, you're trying to understand, what's the question? What's the answer? And also, how does the answer address the question? This is like the most basic level of being trained how to think. And every question has some perception, some assumptions that are built into the question. And if you're going to provide an answer to that question, you have to understand how that answer resolves the question. What elements of the question are addressed by the answer? Sometimes the answer accepts the assumptions and the perceptions of the question. It's just there's some other variable that wasn't present, that wasn't front of mind in the question that's now introduced in the answer. Sometimes the answer completely challenges questions or disregards the assumptions that were baked into the question. So just again, the framework, the mechanisms of the questions and answers, that's very simple, of course, but there's no way to go to the deeper understanding. Well, what's the actual underlying philosophy of the question, of the answer, and so on? You can't get there unless you understand the basics. And again, the basics are or could be viewed as being tedious. And everyone wants to get to the dazzle of the study without being grounded in the basics. But there's no shortcuts. And again, studying Talmud, if you ever have the great privilege, Every line, every word, you want to understand what's it saying. Oh, and what's it not saying? What is conspicuously absent? What's the dog that's not barking? And why does it say this with this terminology, with this precise set of words, and maybe not what we imagine would have been a better way to phrase it? This is written with unfathomable depth. Everything, every single word. It's all measured and precise with astronomical precision. That's just the Talmud. And then you read the commentary, you start with Rashi. What's he doing? He's not telling us something that we would otherwise know. What's he revealing to us? Only if you familiarize yourself with that sort of very careful study, only then can you try to understand, okay, well, we have a dispute amongst the greatest of the commentators. What's the underlying reason of the dispute? If they were here duking it out in front of us, what would they say? How would Rashi respond to the question? The question seems obvious. There's no way that Rashi missed it. Again, the outsider may say, well, maybe, Rashi just mailed it in. That's the mark of a newcomer. There's no way that the question that the Tosfos commentary asks on Rashi, that he just forgot that other teaching in the Talmud. That's not possible. That's not an option. He knew exactly the question that the other commentary is going to pose upon his writings. He knew exactly the citation, and nevertheless, he wrote these words. Now go figure out, how would he resolve it? Now we're slowly approaching the more deeper ways of studying. Of course, it starts with the text of the Talmud. Now we introduce the commentaries, and they're at odds. And now you understand the problem. Now you're trying to break, so to speak, this subject wide open, and then you're slowly approaching the actual underlying depth. And that's where it gets really exciting. That's why it's so intoxicating, because it's so rich and it's so precise and it's so wonderful, but there's a lot of work they have to put in. Again, the things that can be viewed as being tedious to really, really understand the basics before moving on to the commentaries, before plunging into the depths. If you look at the bookshelves in the yeshivos, you have a book of Talmud, Baba Metzia, Kiddushin, so on, Ksubis, Yavamas, all these incredible books of Talmud. There's a whole library of commentaries and essays on this book. There's not a single book of Talmud that you could study it with all the commentaries in one lifetime. It's not possible. Literally thousands upon thousands of thick books on every book of Talmud. And again, there's no filler material. And the razzle, dazzle, pizzazz, exciting stuff, that you have to earn. And that's what one of the ways the commentaries are interpreting this way to wisdom. You have to be well grounded in your studies before you go deep. Because if you do that, it's artificial, and so you're not really acquiring the Torah. There's another benefit of this, by the way. The slower you progress into a subject, the more of it you will retain. If it's just you plunge in and then you plunge right back out, fast in, fast out, it's not a way to really understand it. It's going to escape very, very quickly. So this is way number 41 to wisdom. Misyashev libo betalmudo. Your heart should be well grounded in your studies. If you do that, you will have another way to acquire the Almighty's holy Torah.